Hi, everybody. Welcome to Juvenile Justice. And as you can see in this first slide, that's your textbook, Juvenile Delinquency, third edition. And down the bottom right, Bartolas and Schmaliger are the authors of this textbook. So, as you'll see in your lessons folder in Blackboard, this lecture, we're going to cover chapters 1 and 2. We're going to start with chapter 1. So you have separate assignments and discussions. So you'll see, it'll say chapter 1, writing/discussion. You're going to only discuss the chapter 1 portion. The video links, which I'll put on YouTube, which you've obviously seen and opened, are encompassing both. It's like it's one video, the same link, but each you'll just scroll to or go to the independent chapter. So in this video, again, we're covering both. So let's start chapter 1, adolescence and delinquency. Let's go. Okay, so in the beginning, we need to think why kids do what they do. Why do they grow up a certain way? Why do they, I guess the term, turn into delinquent beings is the question. So we need to defend childhood. So the typical teenage brain is not mature. Young people are routinely characterized by poor judgment and impulsivity. Well, that makes sense. They're kids. Their brains aren't developed yet. Such as the frontal cortex, the part of the brain that is responsible for self-control, effective judgment, and sensible planning, is not developed. All right, so some court cases. In 2010, Graham v. Florida, they abolished life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for teenagers who commit serious crimes. I find it amazing that as we are a civilized society, we look at these court cases, and they're relatively recent. I know you think that 2010 was so long ago. It actually wasn't. More so, 2012, Miller v. Alabama, the court ruled mandatory life without parole for a juvenile precludes consideration of chronological age. And then 2016, the court made retroactive the end of life without parole for those sentenced as juveniles. We were electrocuting kids for committing offenses, same as adults. And we're just now seeing the light at the end of the tunnel that kids do things sometimes because, well, for a lot of reasons, which we're going to cover right now. The 3 criteria for juvenile delinquency. The young person charged with committing the act is below the age to which the criminal court traditionally assumes jurisdiction. And that depends, in some states, where you're at. The act involved would be a criminal offense if it were committed by an adult. So the juvenile is charged with an offense that must be adjudicated in the juvenile court or other court of jurisdiction, or the prosecution in juvenile court judge exercises their discretion to lodge and retain jurisdiction in juvenile court. We just started this process not too many years back where we realized that, hey, we need to have a juvenile court system. We can't bring kids into the same system as the adults. It needs to be different. There are certain factors that need to be weighed. So, adolescence. The life interval between childhood and adulthood. And here's the definition. A distinct yet transient period of development between childhood and adulthood characterized by increased experimentation, getting in trouble, and risk-taking, getting in trouble, a tendency to discount long-term consequences, can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and heightened sensitivity to peers, so they're easily affected, and other social influences, because they're not, remember, their frontal cortex is not developed, so they're easily influenced. They're trying to learn, they're trying to adapt to social and cultural norms. What's right, what's wrong, what's acceptable, what's not, so they test the limits. Okay. Delinquency and other problem behaviors increase. Why? Because the increasing freedom, they're separating from parental scrutiny, and they see more opportunities to be involved in socially unacceptable behavior. What are your friends doing? They develop new, often expensive tastes for certain things. Yet legitimate means for satisfying these desires are not available. I want, but I can't afford it, so maybe I'll take it. So retail theft is high in this time frame for kids. The lengthening of adolescence in the U.S. culture further expands the crisis and struggles. Sure. All right. So delinquency and other problem behaviors increasing during the adolescent years for several reasons. It's a mismatch between adolescents' needs. Again, sometimes they see, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. He has, she has, I want, they have. What about me? The unmet needs and frustrations of early childhood fester. And sometimes, depending upon the kid, they act on it. Some just dream someday. Some say, I want that now. The end of child labor was one of the watersheds in the development of modern adolescence. We used to use kids, and we'll cover this in this chapter, what we used them for. Turn of the century, yeah, they were put in jail, but they were used as workers. Worker bees, they weren't taught the right from wrong. They were just, hey, I got these kids in this in jail. Do you need them on your farm today or this week? Well, sure, send them on over. I'll work them. And that was the way that they were supposed to learn right from wrong. They were just used. But with advancing technology and mechanization, children and adolescents were no longer needed in the labor market. So we went back and realized, hey, what should we be doing with these kids? So by 1914, turn of the century, almost every state had passed laws prohibiting employment in industry of children under the age, well, usually 14. Can you imagine? So they were in trouble, caught shoplifting, doing whatever they did, stealing, maybe stole a horse even. Of course, back then that was a big deal. Put in labor camps and used. Another important stage in the development of modern adolescence was compulsory public schooling. You must go to school. You don't have a choice. The parents can't keep you home to work on the farm. No, you have to go to school. It's the law. A further stage was the development in the 20th century of the belief that raising children had less to do with conquering their spirit than with training and socializing them. So we don't want to break them down, and this is not boot camp. This is not the Marine Corps. No offense to any Marines out there. But, we need to focus on why they do what they do and making them better persons, people, a lot earlier. So an additional stage in this development took place in the 1960s and 70s when special legal protections for juveniles were granted, highlighting the perception of adolescents as needing special attention, guidance, support. And we call ourselves an advanced society. Folks, 1960s and 70s wasn't that long ago. All right, so I'll let you guys look. I'm not going to read all these. I'll highlight a few, the changing treatment of adolescents over time. So historically, I'll start at the beginning, treated as small adults, adolescence is seen as preparation for adulthood. That's a change. Moving down, talk about girls. Adolescent girls were expected to marry and raise a family historically. Now, growing equality for female adolescents. Thank goodness. All right. A few more. Let's see. Children were seen as having few rights. Now, special legal protections were granted to juveniles beginning in the final decades of the 19th century, continuing throughout now. Wow, it took us a while. Okay, let's change gears. Youth culture consists of the unique beliefs, behaviors, and symbols that represent young people in society. How, when, where, and with what and whom they interact. It's important. A primary feature in youth culture is the incorporation of trends or fads. What are they doing? What are your friends doing? What are they wearing? What do they look like? Look now, look at smartphones. I see kids in stores walking in the walls, walking into shopping carts because they're more focused on their phones than where they're walking. There are various youth cultures, and the features of youth cultures, they vary by class, gender, race, ethnicity. What the kids do in Atlanta is going to be different than what they do in some respects in Union County. Big difference. All right, so the youth at risk. The population of children in the United States is increasingly becoming more racially and ethnically diverse. So some stats. There are approximately 75.6 million children ages newborn to 17 in the United States right now. There are approximately equal numbers of children in each age group. So 0 to 5, 25 million. 6 to 11, 24 million. And 12 to 17, 25 million. I just found that number breakdown odd and very unique, that it's so equally balanced. It's just very interesting. And children represent 25% of the American population. Interesting. As our population becomes older, people live longer, still kids are 25%. They're a quarter of our population. The population of juveniles, according to a U.S. Census Bureau estimate, will increase, this is important, you need to know this number, 14%. It will increase 14% between 2000 and 2025. We're almost at 2025. So, hang on one second. That's pretty dramatic. 14%. By 2050, the juvenile population will be 36% larger than it was in 2000. So as our population grows, so does the population of juveniles. So must we, as a society, as a modern society and progressive society, be cognizant of the needs of these kids. All right, so here's a little chart that kind of highlights youth at risk and delinquency. It's in your book. At the center, we see a common denominator, delinquency, and what revolves around it: problems at school, gangs, some mental health issues, a lot of them family problems, sexual activity, drug use and sales. It all goes around one thing: delinquency. So we as a society, again, we need to focus on each one of these. How are we going to tackle these issues? So as a law enforcement official, again, remember, you don't have to be that cop on the beat wearing a gun and the vest and all that. Whether you're probation, whether you're parole, whether you're working in corrections, whether you're working in drug courts, and the list goes on, a DA, you're going to need to be responsible in some facet to some of these issues and help the kids that are having these problems. Okay. Status offenses. This isn't again. It's a question that's going to be in your quizzes, so you might want to know these. Status offenses. Perhaps they're incorrigible at home, at school. They run away from home. Truant. They don't show up for school. Cigarettes, tobacco, alcohol. And for some, they say, oh, it's just being kids. Well, for some, it is just being kids. But for others, they get sidetracked. They get distracted. And they're dependent upon the support structure at home, how they grew up, and peer pressure. They go, when you hit the fork in the road, they take a hard left instead of staying kind of on the straight and narrow. And it's up to us to try to help them. Sometimes the parents just are unavailable, or the parents just can't do it. All right, so explanations for status offense behaviors. Status offenders blame their problems on parental figures in the home. It's mom and dad, it's grandma, it's whoever. They become resentful and angry with their parents or caregivers. The parents often view status offenders as defiant, demanding, obnoxious. They don't know anything. Parents believe they have no control over their kids, and a power struggle results. Parents call the police to intervene. I've gone to many houses. He won't go to bed. He won't do his homework. She's on her phone all the time. Well, what do you want me to do about it? You're the parent. I'm law enforcement. There's no law being broke. But you'll go to a home, and sometimes, often, and you'll deal with these kids that are being maybe disrespectful to the parent or grandparent. And inevitably, those kids start to hate you because you're taking that role. And in the end, I always, I got to the same house or any house, I would look at the parent and say, this is your problem. I'm sorry, but we got to go. School officials and teachers view status offenders as resistant to authority. Sure. Many are psychologically tested and found to be hyperactive or to have ADD. And for some instances, it's valid. Some, I question. There are always cases. There are always kids that need help. And adults. I've known a lot of adults. One guy is an attorney. He has ADD. He's on medication. And an amazing attorney. Brilliant. But it's hard to get him to sit still. So some societal responses vary in how we deal with them, and they vary according to gender. For example, males, well, boys, they're going to be boys. Females, well, they're sugar and spice and everything nice. They're not supposed to act out. So how do we deal with them? Again, it is our problem to an extent. We always say, hey, the parents need to handle them. The courts need to handle them. No, quite often, it's how we as law enforcement professionals, we got to try to do our best to intercede. So at the top, we have law violating acts. The cause. Sometimes they cannot help it. Sometimes they're thrill seeking. Sometimes they want to. That free will kicks in. So we'll label them status and minor offenders. Maybe they're mischievous. Depending upon what they do, are they criminals? So the correctional model to deal with these, well, we should treat them. We should talk with them. We should make them understand what they did. Same thing here. But when that free will kicks in, or if it's a serious offense, you can only cuddle a kid so much. At some point, you have to deal with punishment. All right, so developmental life course theory. 4 main issues in the study of delinquency, DLC. Development of offending and antisocial behavior, protective factors, risk of offending at different ages. Affects the life events on the course of a person's social and personal development. And at the end, the DLC theory, the study of delinquency, why they do what they do, attempts to integrate what is known about the individual, family, school, peers, and the community with situational influences. So, as you'll see in your textbook, and I'm going to kind of point to this theory word, you're going to see in your textbook there are a lot of theorists. There's always going to be someone who has an idea, and this is why kids do what they do, and they'll have a study, and there'll be a control group, and they'll name it. Well, and that's great, and a lot of them had a lot of great ideas, but in the end, it comes down to all of 3 factors, and I mentioned that in the beginning of this video. Is it genetic? Do they have something inside them that causes them to do what they do? Is it environmental? Are there societal or parental factors that made them do what they do as far as being delinquent? Or is it free will? Sometimes they do what they do because they want to, and there's no other factor outside. Sometimes it's a combination. So, it integrates key elements of pre-existing theories to explain delinquency. Oh, I just covered that. So how do we deal with them? Well, the federal government and the public favored a more punishment-oriented response to juvenile delinquency. Let's just punish them. Let's just deal with them. So the juvenile court continued 1980s to employ 3 approaches. The get tough attitude towards violent juveniles led to new justice initiatives. Again, we were just understanding what it is that kids needed, and this is 1980s, folks. So we instill curfews. We make the parents responsible. If they do this, it's your fault, parent. Enhanced efforts to combat street gangs. That's still going on. That one I agree with. Movement towards graduated sanctions. Well, if you do this, you get this. If you do this twice, you get this. If you do this 3 times, we're going to lock you up or send you to a boot camp or get tough scenario or sheriff's ranch, whatever it may be. Boot camps. Programs to deprive youth of guns. That's a debate we can talk about for the next 6 months. More detailed juvenile proceedings. Juvenile transfers to criminal court. Expand sentencing authority. Well, at the end, I offer, how about we just listen to them? Find out what's going on. If you on patrol and you stop a group of kids, hey, what are you doing? Don't just assume they're doing something wrong. Where are you guys going? Oh, we were playing basketball. We're going home. Oh, okay. Well, just be careful. If you're just a lot of traffic here, make sure you walk on the left side of the road facing traffic so you can see cars coming. Oh, all right, thanks. They might, and most likely, not doing anything wrong. But because kids are out late at night, we now assume that they're up to something wrong, something bad. And it's not always the case. Listen to them. Okay, so that was chapter 1. Again, I'll reiterate. You need to comment, post a thread, do your assignment on chapter 1, all about chapter 1. This is a continuing video. So now we're going to go into chapter 2. It's going to be one link, but you need to watch them separately, if you will, and do them separate threads. Okay, change gears. Chapter 2, the measurement and nature of delinquency. You're free to pause this, obviously. We're about 22 minutes in, so we covered a lot. Obviously, you can pause it, come back, take a break. But we're going to move on, just because. So we're going to watch some of this. And it explains the criminal mind, why they do what they do. So hopefully it plays.
Now, there's always got to be a cause. I don't care unless you're a psychopathic person. I don't believe I'm one of those. I should be shot, but you ain't got a bullet, I guess, around handy.
He'll never be the same person. He thought he was. He was the big kahuna. While he was taken down.
I picked up a weapon. I killed the woman in her sleep.
The beating started, and that was a moment frozen in time. It was like it was endless. It seemed to last for an eternity, and I was paralyzed. I couldn't run, I couldn't move, I couldn't think.
This man planned and engineered a brutal killing. He is serving life without parole for 25 years. We will meet him next on The Criminal Mind. Hello, I'm Fanny Kiefer. On this edition of The Criminal Mind, we look at the frightening connection between psychopathy and violent criminal behavior. We will discover how a psychopath thinks, what drives them, and why it is so easy for a psychopath to commit a terrible crime. We'll also take you inside a prison to meet a lifer, a young man who played a deadly mind game and lost. One word of warning: parts of the program are graphic and disturbing. Please use viewer discretion. In 1987, 3 young men entered a family home in a suburban neighborhood. They attacked a sleeping couple and their 15-year-old daughter. The mother was bludgeoned to death with a tire iron. The father and daughter were viciously beaten with a baseball bat. Somehow, they survived. One of the 3 attackers was the son of the very family he tried to kill. His motive was money. If the family died, he would inherit nearly $500,000. He did not act alone. A master manipulator helped him plan and carry out the attack. That man is now serving life without possibility of parole for 25 years. His name is Doug.
You have to take responsibility for your own actions. And that was a tough lesson to learn, that I am the one who is responsible for my actions. Nobody forced me into this.
We started by getting some background on Doug's early life. This prison interview was conducted by forensic psychologist Dr. Douglas Adams.
Home life was not a terrific home life. The stress of my father's employment. My father was an alcoholic, physically abusive.
To whom?
To myself and my siblings.
So what was it like for you experiencing him doing that?
It was scary. It was scary. My father was a very large man, and it was very intimidating. I lived in the shadow of fear. You didn't backtalk. You didn't venture an opinion because it wouldn't be accepted his way or no way at all.
And what kind of things would he do?
Well,
Punching closed fist.
Closed fists or open hands.
Open hand where?
To the head. Held down and belted. Coat hangers, belts.
Coat hangers.
Switches, willow switches.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of behaviors would he respond that way to?
If you talk back, if you spoke up when you weren't supposed to.
So very abusive.
It was. But there were some good times as well. Like, I don't want to just paint a picture that that's the way it was all the time.
In some way, the moments that kind of stick out for me are this posture by his drunken father and this intimidation and the modeling of that throughout his childhood. That really is teaching this kid, you fight or be beaten, you dominate or be dominated. I think that led him into a lot of what he did.
Doug's father traveled a lot and left his mother home with Doug and his younger brother and sister.
I always felt that I needed to be better, that I was not good enough, but I had to take it one step higher. I always had to improve. There was no second place. There was no room for second place. There was only first place.
Did you ever have any problems with violence in those?
No, not really. I mean, other than schoolyard shenanigans. Like, I had a couple incidences of fisticuffs, but it was never serious violence. It was like 4 or 5 shots, and then both parties backed away. Nobody was really injured. Maybe your ego was a little bruised. Now my dad was screaming around at my mom. She found out about it. Get out. He was in the wrong. He knew it. I felt a lot of animosity, a lot of anger towards my stepmother. How could she step in and break up my parents? And I turned around and I challenged the authority of my stepmother. I wasn't going to accept it. My father wasn't around. What was she going to do? I was starting to get bigger. And she was just as abusive. The straw that broke that snapped it, was she was punishing my brother because she could. My brother told her that I hadn't taken this thing. And I had said to my stepmother, I had taken this thing. It's my fault. You're going to punish somebody, come and punish me. And she went into hysterics and tried to beat my brother. I took away her bungee cord and I locked her in a closet. And she was in the closet for almost 12 hours.
How did that feel?
Invigorating. It felt good. It felt like I had some power. I had a little bit of control again. The effects were very devastating on her. You know, in reflection, I look back and I see that. But I didn't think of that at the time.
So then what happened?
She came out and she was pathetic. it was like she was broken. And she just saw it.
Was she scared of you?
I don't think she was scared because I didn't slap her, I didn't hit her. I just physically pushed her into the closet and locked her in.
You know, I asked him, what do you think she felt? Do you think she was scared of you? And he says, well, no, I don't really think so. And, you know, my sense is she must have been very frightened. He doesn't seem to have understood that. So what I'm getting is that his sense of empathy was impaired.
Doug's father split up with his stepmother and sent the kids to live with his real mother and her new husband. He challenged the authority of his stepfather this time and pushed his mother to the limit.
Like, she tried to keep the apron strings on, and that's what I was pushing away from. I wanted to show her I'm my own person, but she was still there, and I knew she was there. I could do all sorts of cruddy things. Like when I was caught, I was arrested during the break-and-enter spree. The fellow that I was with, we pulled about 12 of them in the span of 3 months. There was a whole new world out here that I was just starting to see. I was just starting to awaken to. That world being narcotics. And a sense of rebelling against authority. Like I felt like I'd been under the authoritarian thumb the whole time. And now it was like I was free.
When he graduated from high school, he worked at low-paying jobs. He was stealing from his employers and getting fired. Booze and drugs played a big role. And at 6'5", 300 pounds, violence was easy.
One of the people I beat on really well. And I don't know whether or not he was taken to the hospital. I didn't care. It wasn't my problem. I won that fight. No room for second place.
And how many nights a week would you be drunk?
Maybe 3. Maybe 3 nights a week.
And drugs the other nights, or sober the other nights?
No, drugs all the time. Every day. Drugs.
All day, every day?
All day, every day. Go to work high.
Then what happened?
Well, I started to manipulate the people that were around me for money, for drugs. I was telling them, well, hey, man, if you want to hang out with me and you want to be cool, you know, you'll do that. You'll go and grab me some cash. Many of my friends were older than I was. Like people, drifters, people that hadn't found their way in the world. And I drew them to me, knowing what they were, knowing what I was. And to make myself feel better, I put them down so that I was like king of the losers.
The manipulation escalated when Doug got together with a young man who sparked the tragedy that followed.
I had started to get to know him better because the more he told me about himself, the more leverage I had for manipulation. So I started pushing those buttons, and he started to get very hostile, very angry, not towards me. So I tried to get to the root of the problem. And he had a lot of unresolved issues in his childhood, and this hostility was directed at his own family.
In a moment on The Criminal Mind, the plan behind the crime and the bloody attack. The crime was brutal and bloody. The mother dead, the father and daughter severely injured. Doug planned the crime and he disposed of the evidence, but he didn't hit any of the victims. In the words of his co-accused, he chickened out. Again, we caution you, parts of this program are graphic and disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
It appears, at least at the time of the offending, that this fellow didn't have well-developed empathy skills, didn't realize the impact of his actions on the world, in the sense of having any concern about that.
Like I say, I had encouraged the hostility. I had fueled that. And he says, I want to get rid of them. And I says, well, go ahead. You know, it's no skin off my back. And he went, well, would you have me? And I says, to a limited extent. Because I was like the puppet master, pulling the strings. And that gave me a feeling of power that was lacking. We're going to take him out. And sort of inside I didn't really think he'd had the nerve. I didn't think he had the balls. I thought, yeah, show me what you've got. You want to show me you're a tough guy? Let's see what you got. So we drove past the place. Lights were still on. We came back an hour later. That constituted the plan. because he came back an hour later. I walked in ahead of them into his room. I turned on the light and I turned around and sort of gave him that mocking look. Show me. And he showed me. They went into the master bedroom, equipped with a baseball bat and a tire iron. And I sort of shrugged it off. I felt high. I felt nothing's going to happen. I thought this was going to be the greatest tool that I could use because he built it up so far and then he backed down. But again, I still think part of me said, he can do this. But I ignored that. And the beating started. And that was a moment frozen in time. It was like it was endless. It seemed to last for an eternity. And I was paralyzed. I couldn't run. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I was just there. I didn't feel anything. I felt terrified. How could this be happening? It was like all the drugs washed from my system. He came into the hall and he was brandishing a baseball bat covered in blood. And he says, you have to do this. It's your turn. And I went, no. I can't do that. The object of that beating was a minor, and I just couldn't see myself doing this.
Doug ran out. The son beat his 15-year-old sister until the baseball bat broke in two. He then tried to disguise the crime by setting fire to the house.
And I could still hear the screams. And part of me said, stop this. You can stop this. You have the power to stop this. And I said, yeah. So I ran back into the house to get my other cold cused out. And I came right face to face with one of the victims. And he looked right at me. And I couldn't take it. He didn't look real. He just didn't look real. And he was looking right at me. And there was just a vacant expression. And I don't know if I yelled or if I tried to yell, but I turned and I ran back to the car. We passed by a police cruiser on the way out back to Vancouver. I said, just relax, be calm. They were both covered in blood.
The three spent that night in a hotel. They were in shock. The next day, they went home and were arrested.
And then one of the policemen said to me that one of the strangest thing, he says, he says only one of the three died. He says all three of them didn't die. And I couldn't believe it. I thought all three of them were dead. I thought 3 people had died. I started to cry. I felt relief. I felt scared. I felt many different emotions. And I said, which of the victims died? And he told me.
Next on The Criminal Mind, what goes through the mind of a psychopath? Psychopathy is a personality disorder. It is found in a small number of people, but it can have a devastating impact on society. We know the high-profile names like Clifford Olson and Paul Bernardo. However, not all psychopaths are violent. They live and work with you and me.
For psychopaths, status is everything. The need to dominate other people, to control them, to be a winner. And it's interesting that Doug uses words similar to that effect throughout his interview.
Steve Hart is an expert on psychopathy. He is a professor of psychology at Simon Fraser University, and his professional interest in Doug's case began soon after the crime was committed.
Psychopathy is a specific form of personality disorder. It's characterized by symptoms like being superficial, egocentric, manipulative, lacking remorse, lacking empathy, failing to accept responsibility for your own actions, being impulsive, irresponsible, bad-tempered, and engaging in delinquent and criminal behavior.
Doug agreed to this interview because he thought he could help younger people avoid his pattern of criminal behavior. He consented to the interview knowing that our topic was psychopathy. It is important to remember we are not diagnosing Doug.
In general, there are two features that really describe human relations, or two dimensions that bond people in society. And one of them has to do with status or authority relations, power relations among people. And the other one really has to do with emotional relations or nurturing type relationships. And what we tend to see in psychopaths is a complete lack of emotional or nurturing type relations. They seem to be devoid of emotions or the capacity to feel strong emotions and emotional bonds. If something terrible happens around them, they can feel afraid. But they tend not to have long-lasting emotions like depression, like anxiety, like love. And if you lack capacity for emotions like this, you're really left with one dimension to relate to other people, which is status relationships. When he talks about work history is a very good example of some things that are typical in offenders generally and in psychopaths specifically, things that we would look for. One of them is a tendency to minimize or deny antisocial behavior, and to try to give excuses for those kinds of behavior in a rather superficial way. To him, it's all just part of a big picture. Yeah, I was a reliable, conscientious employee. Apart from the fact that I beat people up at work, I stole from my employer, I used alcohol and drugs, and I showed up late for work every day. There's an inconsistency between the affect that he displays during the interview and what he's talking about. He tries deliberately to keep a fixed facial expression, yet he's talking about an incredible range of subjects in terms of emotional content, yet his facial expression changes little, if at all. And if you turn down the volume, you would find it difficult or almost impossible to tell what he was talking about at any given point in time. But one of the disturbing things in watching an interview like this is how little you actually end up knowing about this young man who committed such brutal crimes.
Not all psychopaths commit horrendous crimes. In fact, some don't commit any crimes at all. People who are successful in business or politics or the stock market could be psychopathic. And psychopaths don't care about who they hurt to get what they want.
There we go. Good point. We'll stop there. Take what you will from that video. Believe from him being, the key point of this video, the individual in prison. What he says with a grain of salt. As I mentioned in the beginning of chapter 1, the causations are real as far as genetic predisposition, environmental causation, and free will. I showed this video because, in essence, all three factors could be argued. We don't have, I know we're technologically savvy and we're advanced as far as our society, but I'll tell you, as far as proving or disproving the genetic component, we're not even close. So let's move on. All right, so some key terms in this chapter for chapter 2. Prevalence, which is the proportion of members of a cohort, that's an important word, cohort, or specific age category who have committed delinquent acts by a certain age. Incidence, the frequency of offending or to the number of delinquent events. Okay, so delinquency cases in juvenile courts, 1960 to 2013. And over here you see the number of cases. So we see a spike in the end of the 90s, 2000. And when you look at these numbers, even though we know that the number of kids, juveniles, is expected to increase by 14% by 2025, we see a decrease of total delinquency. So we're doing something right. our mindset has changed and it's having a positive effect. So we're doing good work. And we can look at males and females broke down. Again, we see some spikes. But again, we saw a heightened point in the mid to late 90s. And being a road officer, I saw this. But now, again, look, we see a decrease. So it's working. But why? Okay, although crime rates in juveniles have declined over the past decades, which is good news, research, as I mentioned, has yet to define any specific reason for kids committing offenses. We're still on the verge of understanding why people do what they do. And until we can get a grasp on that, we'll keep doing what we're doing. The numbers are showing that we're doing the right thing, but we still have a problem. So let's discuss some plausible reasons. Now we're going to get into these three explanations. As I mentioned, genetic predisposition, environmental causation, free will. Or could it be a combination? Look at the video we saw, that individual. It's a good argument for a combination of all three. And so I want you to think about it. What do you think? What's your opinion? Which one holds more water? Perhaps you'll have a stronger opinion or make your decision at the end of this course. I hope so. I'll tell you that to date, there's still not enough research to answer this question. So it's very perplexing. But we're going to do our best. That's what we're going to do our best to do, to try to understand this. All right, so the born criminal, frequently regarded as the founder of biological positivism, this guy, Lombroso, a theorist, is best known for his theory of the atavistic criminal. Important information, you might want to write this down. Lombroso and atavistic. Positivism, biological. All right. According to researchers, the born criminal was atavistic. That is, he or she is someone who reverts to an earlier evolutionary form or level. So we could say it's genetic. Biology, criminality, modern biocriminality. Biocriminology is the study of the physical aspects of psychological disorders. Recent research has demonstrated that crime does indeed have psychobiological aspects, similar to those found in studies of depression. There's also evidence that strongly suggests a genetic predisposition. But again, we're only on the forefront. We've only just begun to fine-tune genetic identification in crimes. Imagine how much work we have to do to start digging into the DNA strands and genealogy, trying to say that right, as to why people do what they do. So moving on, let's talk about syndromes, the XYY. One type of abnormality is the XYY chromosomal male. He receives 2 Y chromosomes from his father instead of 1. Recent studies have discounted the relationship between the extra Y chromosome, however. One problem is separating the environmental factors from the genetic predispositions with which they begin to interact at birth. So, early theorists point out, well, it's the extra Y. Then we start thinking, well, it really has nothing to do with it. So what about twins? Again, researchers have compared identical and fraternal twins in an attempt to determine whether or not crime is genetically predetermined. Largest study of twins by these individuals, Christensen and Mennick, found that the chance of there being a criminal twin when the other twin was a criminal was 50% for identical twins and 20% for the same-sex fraternal twins. Interesting. The finding lends some support to the hypothesis, to the idea that some genetic influences increase the risk of criminality. But we're not there yet. However, a weakness of the research is that it may not be valid to assume a common environment for all twins who grew up in the same house. So they're saying, well, yeah, we have genetic markers, but what if we separated them? These grew up in the same area, so we have to look at the environmental factors. What about adoption? One way to separate genetic and environmental factors is to study infants separated at birth from their natural parents and placed randomly in foster homes. The sick part about this has actually happened. They separated kids just to see what would happen. In the largest study of its kind, researchers hypothesized that criminality in the biological parents would be associated with an increased risk of criminal behavior in the child. Again. So, the end, the controversy over violence and genes. No one's yet found a direct link between genes and violence. The controversial issue is the implication of such finding. We don't know yet. All right. For those of you who are new, and I'm going back to explain why you see the next slide, I try to offer a slide of levity. Again, something funny to break it up. If you're in one of my live classes, we show some things and some videos, and we get a good laugh, and then we move on. So here we are. So an actual wanted ad. Someone, I'll let you read it. You know, you can't make this stuff up. I think it's funny. Just make sure you bring your own weapons. Don't guarantee you're safe when we go back in time. It's not a joke. Come on. He's done this before. Talk about genetic predisposition. Yeah, they're out there. Moving on. The IQ debate. So, historically, the results of IQ tests administered to incarcerated criminals reveal a low IQ, which is interesting. Over the past century, criticism against the usefulness of IQ tests, however, it's mounting. You know, how valid are IQ tests? The debate died down, but resumed again in the 70s and remains to be resolved. In other words, we don't know. It's so subjective. Biochemical. So, are we eating something that's causing us to behave? Is it altering our genetics? Our diet, allergies, hypoglycemia, our hormones unbalanced? Is it that McDonald's Big Mac and fries, all the hormones in there that are messing us up? What about neurocriminology factors? And all kinds of PET scans and other scans and other EEG abnormalities, other brain functions. We don't know yet. I'm here to tell you, I've done a lot of studies on this. I thought about doing this for my dissertation, for my doctorate, and I got frustrated because all I found was all these studies, and in the end, no one knows. They don't know. We don't know. All right. So let's focus on biochemical imbalances. There you go. I'll let you read that for a second. I'm not going to read it all. Just take a second while I get a drink of water. All right. So there we go. Research has shown that some delinquent behavior can be attributed to an orthomolecular imbalance in the body or toxicity. So what we're ingesting, what our environment leaches into us can have an effect. The term orthomolecular refers to correct chemical balances in a body. So if you live next to a nuclear power plant, are you getting radiation? Is it messing you up? There's an example. Or are they doing deep well fracking near you, and are you drinking the water, and is it contaminated? Biochemists suggest that when normal functioning is affected by diet, pollutants, and or genetic deficiencies such as allergies, abnormal deficits, or excess in molecular brain concentrations of certain substances, we can possibly become delinquent as far as kids. It's a thought. But, as we know, there are criticisms. Biocriminologists often deny the existence of individual free will. It doesn't exist. We do things because of X, Y, and Z, not because of something floating out there that we can't explain. Some feel that biocriminologists unfairly de-emphasize social and economic factors. Well, They refuse to look at the big picture, perhaps. But an integrated theory is that scholars explain predatory street crime by showing how human nature develops from the interplay of psychological, well, biological, social factors, IQ, body build, genetics. Oh my goodness, and the list goes on. Psychological development. The psychoanalytic theory of criminality attributes delinquent criminal behavior at least three causes. A conscience so overbearing that it arouses a feeling of guilt. That could be argued as free will. A conscience so weak that it cannot control the individual's impulses. Kind of free will again. The need for immediate gratification. It could be argued again, free will. All right, so Sigmund. I'm sure you've all heard about this individual, Sigmund Freud. He was a theorist. He suggested that a person's psychological well-being is dependent on the healthy interaction of the id, which is the id consists of powerful urges and drives for satisfaction, gratification, what that person needs, what we need, the id. Then the balance of ego, which is the executive personality acting as the moderator between the id and the superego. So there's a referee between two teams causing or moderating what happens. Kind of, nope, you go over there, and here's the fine balance. Kind of like a tightrope. Because the superego, it acts as a moral code or conscience. Is it too moral? Is it too extreme? Is the id too powerful? Good question. I can't answer it. Maybe you can. Despite the criticism of psychoanalytic theory, three basic principles are of interest to psychologists who study criminology. The actions and behavior of an adult are understood in terms of childhood development. Sometimes, but we have to look back at how someone grew up, right? Behavior and unconscious motives are intertwined, and their interaction must be unraveled if we are to understand criminality. And then criminality is essentially a representation of psychological conflict. So let's look at maternal deprivation and attachment theory. Yes, those are pigs in that picture with striped jackets on. Research indicates that shortly after birth, mammals form an emotional bond. I think we all agree. The strength of the bond or the attachment will affect the child's social development and ability to form attachments in the future. Research has been unable to show a clear relationship between social class and delinquency. So now they're doubting whether one's environment is to blame for delinquency. And maybe that lower class youngsters vary not in the frequency of delinquency acts from middle and upper youngsters, but the types of delinquent behaviors. May also argue that delinquent acts of adolescents from lower class backgrounds are more serious than those committed by youths in upper class. Now, anyways, you make your decision. As we go on, we're going to talk about these and other factors that weigh in, but these three dispositions, these three causations are going to stand in front of you, if you will, and you're going to see these throughout this course. So to which direction you lean, that's up to you. That's why I welcome opinions. You can't be wrong, because look at all these theorists, these well-known people that have gotten high degrees and study people, why people do what they do. They don't know either. All right? All right, so I offer a final thought. And again, those of you who know me, you know that I do this. Those new students, well, I do this at the end of my lectures because I want you to leave, kind of change gears, and I want you to think of something other than what we just learned, if you will, something about life. So, I choose to live by choice, not by chance, to be motivated, not manipulated, to be useful, not used, to make changes, not excuses, to excel, not compete. I choose self-esteem, not self-pity. I choose to listen to my inner voice, not the random opinions of others. basically be yourself. I'm here to help you do that. I hope you'll learn a lot from this course. Again, I'll be doing lectures throughout. If you need to talk to me on the phone, just let me know, send me an email. So make sure that you're doing the writing assignments. Well, here you are. You continue doing them. Post a thread. Answer 2 other students. Do the quizzes. Start now thinking about and preparing for the critical thinking paper, because it's going to get away from you if you don't start working on it right now. Okay? All right. Have a great rest of the week.